Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a fantastic day. If you've seen the first video in this series where we reviewed Colossal Swords, link down below, you'll already know what this is about. But super briefly for those who don't, this is a tournament-style elimination and crown the ultimate best weapon for that category. If there's enough interest in this series, once we're done, we may have a Champions finale where we crown the ultimate victor. So please let me know which weapon category you'd like to see next. So in round 1, we'll be checking a few different stats and comparing overall viability. We'll be splitting this up between smithing stone weapons and somber stone weapons initially for the early rounds, just until we can eliminate a few of the obvious losers, and then we'll be bundling the last few remaining spears together. So firstly, we start off with a lot of smithing stone weapons. So as we start comparing the stats of all of these weapons, let me just let you know that as with the Colossal Swords, I have gone for a set 50 in all of the offensive stats. I've ignored arcane because none of these spears scale with arcane. But for the purposes of comparing attack ratings, we have got 50 strength, 50 dex, 50 intelligence, and 50 faith. Again, I explained this previously. I know that means some of the weapons aren't going to be min-maxed perfectly, so some of these attack ratings won't be absolutely spot on. But the attack rating is just one tiny little piece of information that will make up the overall tournament. And this gives us a rough idea of how good the weapons are. Just very quickly, I will flash them up on the screen for you. We have got the short spear, iron spear, the regular spear, the partisan, the pike, the spiked spear, the cross naginata, the celebrant's rip rake, and the clayman's harpoon. Technically, there is also the torch pole, but we'll touch on that in just a second. Now, of these 10 or so weapons I just listed out, we are immediately going to eliminate 5 of them before we even look at them. So the first 5 I listed, the spear, the iron spear, and the short spear, the partisan and the pike, none of them hold a candle to the spiked spear or the cross naginata. Immediately we are going to eliminate these 5. Their attack ratings are just abysmal when compared to all the other spears, even when you start to look at applying affinities and different weapon arts to them. The reason the spiked spear is still in, despite the fact that this also doesn't have the best attack rating, is the fact that it has inherent blood loss buildup. And the cross naginata is just far superior. It has far more base attack rating and the blood loss buildup as well. So them two will be going through to round 2. Next up, we've got the clayman's harpoon. This is the only customizable spear, aka affinities and weapon arts, etc., which also includes elemental damage, giving this a huge advantage and making it a very rare weapon type. Its base attack rating is also far above the rest of the standard smithing stone spears. So that, along with the cross naginata and spike spear, will be going through to round 2. Next up, we have got the Celebrant's Rip Rake. This has a cool gimmick in that you earn a minuscule amount of runes every time you attack, but it falls flat in every single other area. Just by looking at the picture of it here on the inventory screen, I believe it should include blood loss. I mean, look at that. That would be the only redeeming quality, but that is definitely going. It's a terrible weapon. And finally, I know I said the Clayman's is the only one which includes elemental damage, and yes, technically the torch pole does have fire damage, but it's just a glorified torch at the end of the day. It's good in a pinch against enemies specifically weak to fire if you have literally no other options. But unlike all other smithing stone weapons, you cannot infuse this or change the affinity, so the rest of them will far outclass it in terms of damage as soon as you start tweaking them. So that is also gone. Obviously, we were always going to eliminate a lot of smithing stone weapons in round 1, so now let's take a look at the somber stone weapons. First up, the only weapon on the list I was afraid of saying out loud, because I have no idea if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, the Inquisitor's Girandol. This has the best attack rating out of any spear, and it also has the best scaling, with a C in both strength and dexterity and a B in faith. It also does fire damage and has blood loss buildup. So effectively, it's the best of every single other spear that we reviewed so far combined. This is definitely moving on to the next round. Next up, we've got the Crystal Spear and the Rotten Crystal Spear, both with nearly the exact same stats and a very tiny amount of magic damage on top. Now, the base attack rating for both of them is abysmal, and as they are somber weapons, you can't change the affinity to improve this. The Crystal Spear does have a bit more attack rating than the Rotten version, but it's still significantly lower than any other somber spear on this list, and it has no other redeeming qualities other than the small amount of magic damage, as even its Ash of War is a really boring one that cannot be changed. Therefore, the Crystal Spear is also eliminated in round 1. Now, as for the rotten version, I would also remove this because its attack rating is even worse, but very few weapons in the game have Scarlet Rot build-up, and that is pretty significant, so it survives for now. Next up, we've got the Clean Rot Spear. This has one of the highest attack ratings on the list, just barely behind the Death Ritual Spear and the Bolt of Gransex. It also deals holy damage, which is great until you get to the end game, and we'll be talking about the end game later. It has pretty decent scaling and an incredibly awesome Ash of War. So that, again, will move on to round 2. And the final two we will touch on thoroughly in later rounds, because that is the Death Ritual Spear and the Bolt of Gransex. And obviously they both get full marks. They are the most powerful weapons on this list, hands down, at least when you're looking at them purely on paper. Whether either of them wins is yet to be seen. Next up for round 2, we are going to look at the Ashes of War. Obviously, this can be changed for the smithing stones, so this round will primarily focus on the somber stone weapons. And just to give you a quick rundown, we've got 8 spears still left in the running at the moment. That is the Spiked Spear, the Cross Naginata, the Clayman's Harpoon, the Inquisitor's Girandole, the Rotten Crystal Spear, the Clean Rot Spear, the Bolt of Gransex, and the Death Ritual Spear. Let's briefly skim over the smithing stone weapons. The Spiked Spear is just a slightly worse version of the Cross Naginata in every way, and has the exact same base Ash of War. Obviously, you can change the affinity for the weapons, you can further increase the scaling, you can change the Ashes of War, but at base level, the Cross Naginata is just a more powerful version of the Spiked Spear. Also, it has a really powerful, really cool, completely unique moveset, so it would make no sense putting them both through, because the Cross Naginata is just a better version of the Spiked Spear. I will just quickly show you a bit more footage from the Spiked Spear though before we eliminate it, just to call out this incredibly awesome Ash of War. Who else here has or hasn't used Phantom Slash? I've used it before, and people have recommended to me how cool it looks, but I didn't quite grasp exactly how good this Ash of War is. Did you know that you and the Phantom can attack different targets if you switch up the target mid-attack, simultaneously taking 2 enemies out at once, which makes you feel really, really cool. If you were to apply this on a more powerful weapon than the Spiked Spear, this could be so devastating, and I may need to do an entire build purely based around this Ash of War. Also, as you can see in this next clip, the Phantom Slash is very, very good at tracking whatever you're locked onto, meaning even when this dragon's head is high up in the sky, my Phantom will fly into the sky along with it and do a critical headshot, dealing more damage, but more importantly, more poise damage, meaning enemies whose limbs are usually quite hard to reach, this Ash of War can make that so much easier for you. Sorry for sidetracking, I just thought that piece of information was very crucial, and as many people as possible really need to hear that because it's amazing. Right, now that the Spiked Spear is gone, let's get back to the list. The other remaining smithing stone weapon is the Clayman's Harpoon. This is by far the best of all the smithing stone weapons, and with something like the Flame Art or the Sacred Affinity, you can actually give it 3 different damage types, making it insanely versatile. If you combine this with something like the almighty Black Flame Tornado Ash of War, you now have a weapon that is effective against practically every single enemy in the game. And as I was reviewing this and doing all of the testing and research for this video, I started to realize how incredibly slept on this weapon is. This spear is insane, and as it's dropped by the Claymen, with a not too bad drop chance, you can farm it and power stance 2 of them. So this is definitely going through to round 3. Now let's take a look at somber stone weapons. Firstly, the Inquisitors and the Rotten Spear both just use Charge Forth. It's not the worst Ash of War in the game, but it is truly quite boring and not great. Both of these weapons do have their perks. Like the Inquisitors has probably the most powerful attack rating of any weapon on this list, and the Rotten Spear of course does have the Rot buildup. However, as already mentioned, attack rating is definitely not the be-all and end-all of a build, and you need a lot more than that to cut the mustard with a late game build. Likewise, the Rot buildup on the Rotten Crystal Spear is super low compared to the few other Rot weapons in the game. Just to give you one comparison, it has the same amount of Rot buildup as the Antspur Rapier, but as it's a spear, its attacks are much, much slower than the Rapier. Also, it can't be buffed or infused like the Ant Spur, so as far as rock weapons go, it's probably the worst one there is. Therefore, both of these spears are out of the competition. Now, for the 3 final Somberstone weapons, we have got the Clean Rot Spear, the Death Ritual Spear, and the Bolt of Gransax, all of which have insanely good Ashes of War, so of course they're all going to make it into round 3, where we are now reviewing the viability in late game builds. Now, as we move into round 3 and looking at late game builds, I realise we're actually already into our final 5, and this was going to be a top 5 list. So rather than dragging it out and having too many rounds, let's use round 3 to quickly see if any of these weapons aren't going to keep up with the rest of them in a proper late game build before we do our final official ranking. So we definitely do have a couple of clear winners for the top spots. The only 2 I was considering removing from the final rankings were the Cross Naginata and the Clean Rot Spear. However, they both do have some really good redeeming qualities, so let's take a look at them and see if they're going to make it into the final 5. The Clean Rot Spear has a nearly unique heavy attack shared only with that of the Short Spear. And though it's definitely not the best weapon on this list, you can have a lot of fun with its fairly powerful Ash of War. If you time it right and you're good at telegraphing enemies' attacks, you can get an entire platoon of soldiers to run into it and simultaneously die all at once, which is very, very satisfying. As for the Cross Naginata, when infused and min-maxed, it can pack quite a punch. Combine that with the fact that it has an entirely unique moveset, which combines piercing and slashing, and the fact that it's the only weapon left on this list with inherent blood loss, means that it can actually be really, really solid in a late game build. The other 3 definitely make it in, no question, so let's give them all our final official ranking. I think it'll be no surprise to everyone that 5th is going to be the Clean Rot Spear. Its only real redeeming quality is its Ash of War. Once you strip that away, it's just a regular spear, and not even one of the most powerful ones at that. At number 4, this is probably going to surprise you. We've barely spoken about it, but let's finally discuss the Death Ritual Spear. This is in 4th place because it has the potential to be the best weapon on the list due to its insanely powerful Ash of War. But it's quite slow, and more importantly, it is ridiculously inconsistent. Especially on single targets or even groups of smaller targets, it can easily miss every shot, either dealing thousands of damage or none. And once you remove its Ash of War, it's just a good spear with good scaling. Situationally, it can be very powerful, hence why it's made it into the top 5, because its Ash of War can be devastating on massive enemies and bosses, but it makes it no further than that. In 3rd place, we have got the Cross Naginata, the second best of all regular smithing stone spears. At first, I really undervalued this weapon, but the fact that it has a unique moveset, inherent blood loss, and that it's so customizable really safely secures it in 2nd place. 2nd place is probably gonna be another surprise, so I'll reveal the top spot first, because then it's obviously going to be very easy what has made it into 2nd. And the top spot, in fact, goes to the Clayman's Harpoon, which means the Bolt of Gransax is the runner-up in 2nd. This weapon is of course insanely badass. Its Ash of War is one of the most powerful and far-reaching abilities in the game, especially when fully charged. And if you didn't know, it actually deals 20% additional damage to dragons and 10% additional damage to ancient dragons. However, once enemies get up close and personal and you can't use that Ash of War, you've just got a decent lightning spear in your hands. So it's far too situational for that top spot. Now, what we've all been waiting for, let me talk about how to min-max and make the absolute most out of your new favourite spear, the Clayman's Harpoon. Oh my god, is this weapon good. The multiple damage types that it can do and the versatility mean that it can fit into practically any build. When infused with magic infusion, it will give a B scaling in intellect, and the damage scaling for this weapon is primarily applied to magic damage, which means all of your magic damage Ashes of War are going to do crazy amounts of damage. A few examples include the Glintstone Pebble, Loretta's Slash, or the Ice Spear. Similarly, when infused with cold, it offers over 100 cold buildup, I believe it's 105, and a C scaling in both strength and int. And again, as damage scaling is primarily applied to magic, this makes your cold Ashes of War, such as Chilling Mist and Hoarfrost Stomp, crazy effective. My personal recommendation though would be something that you can use Flame Art or Sacred with, because these give you the most attack rating. Using Flame Art Black Flame Tornado will offer you a dual element output with 3 total damage types, really good scaling, and one of the best Ashes of War in the game, melting big and little enemies alike. You could even power stance 2 of these bad boys and have your offhand weapon apply a buff first, then switch back to having them both equipped to maximize your damage output. The possibilities are endless with this crazy powerful weapon. And one last thing to leave you with as we're wrapping up. I adore sharing this information with the community. I just want to help. It's my main drive for this channel. So a lot of these realizations, revelations, and testing are done live on stream. I actually do stream over on Twitch 4 or 5 days a week. The link is down below, but it is simply just twitch.tv/Dom's Roundtable. So if you'd like to come and join us live and be a part of the magic as it happens, that would be awesome, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. Also, a huge shout out and thank you to all of our Patreons. Being a Patreon or leaving a super thanks helps me to continue to be able to do this for you, and I cannot thank you enough. You are truly amazing. And with that, all that's left for me to say, my friends, is as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.